Welcome back, everyone. Let's jump right into today's explainer, where we're going to take a magnifying glass to the fascinating everyday details of the world around us. Today, we're actually looking at a total masterclass in observation. Our source material is this beautifully detailed entry from a series called Notes on Fishkeeping. Specifically, we're diving into part 272, which was published on June 16, 2026, by a hobbyist known simply as Ang. Now, you might be thinking, a journal entry about fish in a backyard pond, isn't that just a simple update? But as we'll see today, it's so much more than that. It perfectly captures the scientific method in action, showing us how careful daily observation can actually lead to some pretty profound biological insights.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right off the bat, our source greets us with Dear Interweb. I mean, it's just such a charming, disarming way to open a log, right? And it immediately sets the tone for what we're dealing with today. We aren't looking at some dry, peer-reviewed academic paper. This is an intimate, daily journal entry from a seriously dedicated amateur hobbyist. It really represents that wonderful corner of the internet where passionate people meticulously document their everyday routines and just share them with the world. Reading this, it kind of feels like we're invited right into Ang's backyard, standing right there at the water's edge, checking in on the daily routine.
Section 1. Notes on Fishkeeping. Establishing the baseline.
So, before you can recognize that something has changed, you really have to know exactly what normal looks like. In any kind of observational science, whether you're a high-level researcher or just a backyard hobbyist, the daily routine is the canvas where anomalies paint themselves. Ang establishes a very clear baseline here, and we immediately see this strict division in the daily feeding routine. You've got the brooding pair, the adult parent fish, getting the larger pellets. Then you have the fry, the babies, getting the smaller ones. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But think about the meticulous care going on here. Ang isn't just tossing a random handful of generic food into the water and walking away. Raising entirely different generations of fish in the exact same pond requires highly targeted, deliberate care. You literally have to make sure the tiny mouths of the fry get the right nutrition while the mature adults get enough substance to maintain their size. It's a real balancing act, and this split diet is the established status quo of the pond.
Moving on to Section 2. The next growth phase, a biological shift. So we have our baseline established, but then on June 16th, that routine completely changes. This is really the inciting incident of our source text. Ang goes out for the daily feeding, totally expecting the usual dynamic, big pellets for the adults, small pellets for the babies. But instead, Ang notices this fascinating biological milestone. The fry have quietly transitioned. They've essentially leveled up right there in the water. You know, nature rarely announces these shifts with a loud alarm. It shows us through these subtle behavioral changes. And Ang logs two very specific indicators of this new juvenile growth phase. Number one, the babies are suddenly going after the larger pellets. Number two, there's this increased reddish color intensity spreading throughout their little bodies. In the world of the Jewel Cichlid, diet and physical coloration absolutely go hand in hand. They aren't just getting bigger, their underlying biological chemistry is visibly altering. The appearance of that striking reddish hue is literally the visual confirmation of the nutritional milestone we're seeing with their food.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer physical implication of this one simple sentence. They are now able to feed on the larger pellets. That is a massive physical leap. It means their mouths have grown wide enough, their digestive systems have matured enough, and frankly, their boldness has increased enough to actually compete for a larger food source. This isn't just a preference, it's a complete mechanical upgrade in the biology of the fish. They've officially graduated from the nursery phase.
Section 3. The Space Dilemma. The Hypothesis.
Now, Ang doesn't just record this observation and close the journal. Like any good scientist, Ang looks at this new data and instantly forms a hypothesis about the future. Because now that these fish have entered this highly demanding new growth phase, a brand new problem pops up. A biological shift requires an environmental shift. And that is the central dilemma Ang poses right here. Will these newly minted juveniles actually grow into large, mature adults if they remain grouped together in their current cramped environment? Notice how Ang puts the word pond in quotation marks in the original text. That strongly suggests this current enclosure is kind of makeshift or at least highly constrained. In fish keeping, there is this constant tension between the genetic potential of the animal and the physical limits of its environment. Ang knows that keeping this growing generation bunched up with the adults might actively stunt their newfound growth. Basically, space has become a massive limiting factor.
Which leads us directly to this light bulb moment. Perhaps this is a good time to move them to their own outdoor pond to encourage further growth. This is where human intervention comes into play. If you want these fish to reach their ultimate potential, the caretaker has to step in and manipulate the environment. You just can't leave it to chance. Spotting that red coloration and the larger pellet consumption, that was the signal. And this planned relocation, that's the necessary response.
Section 4. The balcony pond experiment, a return to nature.
So what exactly is the proposed solution to this space dilemma? Well, Eng reveals this long-planned project that is perfectly timed for an upcoming holiday break. It's time to build a totally new ecosystem. We're officially moving from passive observation to active experimentation. Let's walk through the specific procedural steps Eng outlines for testing this out. Step 1. Physically move the juvenile fish to a brand new setup, the backyard balcony pond. Step 2. Introduce aquatic plants that specifically require full sunlight. Step 3. By combining this new space, the plants, and the direct sun, expose the Jewel cichlids to a significantly more natural environment than their current, quotation marks, pond. This whole thing isn't just about giving them more water to swim in. It's about creating a dynamic, sunlit ecosystem that actually mimics their natural habitats way better than their starting point ever could.
So the crucial point is right here in Eng's own words. I want to experiment. This just perfectly underlines that amateur scientist arc we've been tracking today. What started out as a completely routine chore, feeding pellets to fish, evolved through the careful observation of pellet size and reddish coloration into a hypothesis about spatial constraints and has finally arrived at a full-blown experiment. Eng is actively testing whether a natural, sunlit environment will act as the catalyst for the Jewel cichlid's ultimate maturity. It is just a beautiful, micro-level example of the scientific method playing out right there on a backyard balcony.
Which leaves us with this final thought as we wrap up today's explainer. Eng's notes on fish keeping might be hyper-focused on Jewel cichlids, but the core principle here is completely universal. How might changing the environment of those we care for unlock entirely new phases of growth? Whether we're talking about plants, pets, or even the people we manage and nurture, sometimes, just like those growing fish, you absolutely cannot reach your full, vibrant potential until you're given the proper space and the right kind of sunlight to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing the world around you, and I will catch you on the next one.